All right, so welcome to another class, another lesson. H Radio 223's part-timers. My name is Chris, and obviously, if you do have any questions and any concerns, or you need some assistance in any way with the subject, please just hop onto the WhatsApp group and find my number, DM me correctly, or directly, should I say, and we'll get that sorted. All right. So let me just quickly share the slides for today. Yeah. Uh, so in the previous lesson, just at the end of it, I said that we would actually speak about a revision class. Has stopped. Excuse me. Sorry. Just trying to share again. Where is there we go. Okay, there we go. All right, but it was just emitted from the lessons itself, which is actually fine with me because I find a revision lesson a bit redundant. And it was with regard to music scheduling and playlisting, etc., etc. I did say that I did mention that there was going to be a bit of a video on Radio DJ, which I then decided I'm going to play that in class with you, and then we can start looking at playlisting a little bit more practically when I see you next week. Okay. So we've got obviously a nice brand new start to a new section within our learning, which is sports and news and traffic and weather, part one of 12 from the Cullinan and Nash. It's Cullinan and Nash. There we go. If we get that pronunciation correct. From Next Level Radio, 5.3, compiling news, sport, traffic, and weather, page 181 to 182. From Geller's book, Beyond Powerful Radio, looking at chapter 19, creating powerful news, from page 217 to 236. So the lesson is quite lengthy, so pay attention and maybe get a coffee or I don't know, a tea or whatever it is that will comfort you through quite a long lesson. What I am going to do in terms of media wise, we're going to look at two news reports. One from, I think I've got one from EWN, and I've got one from SABC News. Excuse me, excuse me. Right, excuse me. Right, I want to get my bottle of water, like I've recommended to you. There we go. It should be a little bit better. Okay, so I wanted to particularly there's a story, yeah, I think there's stories about Zuma that I can try compare the one bulletin to another, or the one obviously news segment to another. I know we're teaching news in radio, but it's quite difficult to actually find or land on stations that go and podcast their news, because it becomes, once again, it becomes a little bit redundant to go and put a podcast for every single bulletin that does exist there. So it's okay. It's okay. It's not. It's far removed from what it is that we're talking about today. More so about the actual context and the relevance of what it is that we put into our news bulletins, not so much the execution, which is something that I would rather do practically with you as well. Okay. All right. So we will be looking at those two videos as well while we go through the videos. Sorry, the slides as well. Okay. So let's get into it. All right. So the four pillars of content are important to radio, regardless of the kind of station, and these four factors will be to present one. First and foremost, a radio station must serve to inform its listeners, which we know. A very first type, or the very first types of information that are critical when it comes to informing our listeners, are obviously all the really important stuff in their lives: the news, the sports, the traffic, and weather. Yes, we are important as DJs or jocks or presenters, broadcasters, doesn't matter, but these are the things that do affect our listeners' lives, and directly, I'm saying, across the entire spectrum of our target audience that we do speak to. So even something as small as weather is the most spoken say subject matter in the world. I've mentioned this before. We always, yeah, we get nearly pretty much almost every single day conversation, either to ourselves or to someone else we speak of how hot it is, how cold it is. Like I'm wearing a jacket today, which I didn't expect to because it's like the middle of September or whatever it is. It was so hot last week, and now it's just freezing again. Or we have this conversation about weather continuously within all our daily lives, right? So weather really is important, even though it is quite an erratic factor in our lives and an erratic factor within news because weather predictions can only be, I mean, they're limited. I think if I mean, you would notice this as well if you're looking at your weather app or even the built-in app that it comes with your phones. If you look at the weather yesterday, like the weather prediction, obviously, or the forecast for today, it would be, let's say, I don't know, like 22. I think it's 22 here in Pretoria, right? But if I look at it today, and just so that I don't lie to you, I'm just going to quickly just pop onto it today. It might have changed because I did look at it last night. Just give me a second here. One actually just loads. While it loads, I'll try and tell you a little bit more about what it is that I'm trying to say is that the weather can only be predicted to a certain, yeah, like here we go. Okay, today is 23, right? So it's not a massive difference, but what I'm trying to say to you is that with weather, it is unpredictable. We can only forecast up to I think about 10 to 12 hours. So when it becomes important, when weather becomes really important, is when it becomes, and again, I'm talking a lot about weather, but just to show you how something so small, again, is so incredibly relevant to our lives. Like if there's snow, or if there's a lot, like a torrential rain, or if there's a tornado, or if there is what is it down in the coast? Like there's extremely strong winds, like on the coast, that could obviously damage cars or housing or whatever it is, obstruct like traffic or whatever it may be, right? Whether it's important and people will want to know immediately, like at any one particular point, like what is it that I can do, or what is it that I know that I can prepare for my day ahead or my day currently as we move along. So anyway, so something as small as quote unquote weather is still more important than what you have to say as a DJ in terms of your content that you prepared for the show. So, traffic, obviously important, sport, very important, news, very important as well to our listener. The news is a segment of content that a listener can obtain every hour, right? And every half hour on headlines in a neatly packaged bulletin or report. So news contains a number of stories with supporting information that are relevant to our target audience. Okay, and as we see and as we go through the semantics, you'll see why national news is important and relevant to pretty much everyone anywhere here in South Africa because it is a national, even if it happens in Cape Town or if it happens in Durban or whatever it is, but it has national significance. But then we go to regional and we go to like I say, well, community, local, even, and whatever it may be that we might break it down based on how important our feeder area or where our feeder area is based, right? So we'll have like again like our top our top regional top national stories, our top regional stories, top local so community local stories, our top international stories. We'll have tail enders, whatever it may be, right? And same with sports. We look at a direct feed area. What is it that they really are interested in? Is it more soccer? Is it more rugby? Is it more important to talk about like semantics of politics and structure and governance or whatever it is? Sports is quite tricky, in terms of what might go first and where fixtures do land up, and depending on the day as well. Like for example, if we're talking about sports bulletins on a Saturday, fixtures a lot more important than actual news bulletins. I'm saying news stories that revolve around the sports sphere. Okay, at most radio stations, a news bulletin is followed by a report of sport, traffic, and weather. Right. So we say at most radio stations because a lot of the stations decide to omit the importance of maybe weather, right? For example, like again, like our station doesn't cover weather at all, and I don't. I personally do not agree. Just in general, of with why you shouldn't include any one of these things, including financial indicators. It makes no sense to me because again, financial indicators are so far removed. I say in terms of like no one works. A lot of us don't work for the JSE, and we don't work with stocks, and we don't work with that type of stuff, right? Commodities, etc. But again, because of the ripple effect it has on our economy, it is important for us to know how much a dollar will cost us in terms of rands, or how much the pound is, and the euro and the yen and the Australian dollar. You know, these are the major currencies in the world, as well as the gold and the oil price. The oil price for definite. You know, if it goes up, you know that we're going to be hitting like high prices on at our petrol stations, etc. And it does affect our lives, right? So I never ever see my personally, again, I never see the justification of why it is that someone would exclude any element of the news itself, right? The construct of the news itself, so what it is that we talk about, what it is that we decide to put into the news, so maybe we decide to make it all local, right? Is also debatable. It like justify why the news of international, well, obviously the international, what is the, sector of the world is not important. That doesn't make any sense. We need to be worldly as well. We need to know what is happening in, in other countries and, again, other cultures, whatever it may be. Right. Even if it doesn't have a direct influence on what it is that a South African does, like in the everyday life, it's a bit, it's it's silly for me. Like it's a bit egotistical to think that we must now only focus on South African news. It makes no sense. We really give priority to our local, like I'm saying, like our South African news. Anyway, within every news story, right? Sports is obviously important because it's part of a part of our recreational life, right? And even if you're not a sports fanatic, the sports news might not be important to you, but it is very important to a lot of other people. And why is that? Because around the world for many decades, it has grown into like a staple part of our lifestyle diet, So sport is very important and should be included as part of your news bouquet. Right. Okay. Sports can unify provinces and nations, with obviously its ever-changing environment, and there will always be a lot to write about when we want to talk about sport. And as you know it. So within traffic, obviously need live and regular updates. So it doesn't help for us to do a traffic update that was new maybe an hour ago, even 45 minutes ago. Traffic definitely is something that's very erratic. Um, the weather, not so much. I say, like, if you are doing it in one show, 10 to 1, the weather forecast will remain the same unless there's extreme weather or there are extreme weather conditions. Each person waking up in the morning wants to carry out like their plans for the day. What are they going to do? Especially, like I say, what you're going to wear. Are you going to take a jacket take a jacket with you to work? Are you not like? Do you want to wear some shorts, or you want to wear like a dress instead of pants or whatever it may be? Because it's uncomfortable if you decide to wear, let's say, a jersey that you can't take off because you don't have a shirt underneath, for example, and now it's blazing hot, and you're like, oh my word, my day is just like it's being aggravated by this. It's not petty. Like these are things that are important to us, and want to take an umbrella, or whatever it is, want to take a raincoat, that type of stuff, because we're going to get wet. So the weather is super important again for that kind of pragmatic essence of our life or sector of our life. For example, wearing the wrong shoes because you didn't know it was raining, or taking your regular route to work only to discover that, damn, man, oof, this is going to be like a 2 hour delay. which I know that we put on Google Maps just in general, just if we are driving in our own cars, as opposed to driving in taxis where someone else is controlling obviously the flow of where we are and the flow basically and the direction of where we are heading. But oof, there's nothing worse. I think when I start, not that I think I know. When I get into the car and I know, like I am going to, let's say, I mean, I only work in Joburg, so different parts of Joburg, and I get to, like, I live very far away. I get past the toll gate and I haven't got my Google Maps on. Like, I almost have like a tiny little panic because almost anything and everything from that toll gate onwards can ruin my timing, because I've said, okay, I'm going to take, let's say, maybe an hour and a half just to be safe to get to wherever I need to in Joburg. And so what I do immediately is I just put on that Google Maps just by the default, because I need to know whether I need to take like the Old Johannesburg Road or the Old Johannesburg Pretoria Road, should I say, if I need to take maybe the Atterbury off ramp and do the back roads down there in Menlyn, where there's always a problem somewhere in Midrand, even there by what is that stupid street, man? Oh, I can't even remember now. There's quite a few down there in Madrid that you get stuck. Anyway, but my point is, like I would rather know that I have a little bit of control about my route and I know exactly how much time I have left or whatever, instead of being stuck in gridlock, right? So the thing is that why the newsreader, the traffic reader, should I say, is more important than your Google Maps is that they have much more sophisticated software that can update you and give you alternative routes and so much more. But I wouldn't say that I would never rule out the importance of, let's say, your phone apps and your navigation apps, right? Anyway, the point is, it would be weird also, like if it's weird when you listen to a bulletin and there isn't a traffic report and there isn't weather and there isn't sports or there isn't, well, obviously there might be news, there will be news, right? Anyway, so how do you build a great news team? Right. So network news executive Bernard Gershon, right? Gershon looks for these traits in a news person. One, their desire or hunger is crucial because they want to be able to go find a new story. Storyteller who exudes energy, right? Super serving. The listener is important. Reward people for excellent work. Nurture your team. Don't be interchangeable. Be an individual, and whenever possible, record and use natural sound. Right. Okay. So I don't want to really go further than that. I think that's quite direct, right? And quite clear. I'm going to. Oh, where did I put my textbook now? Oh, here it is in front of me. Okay. All right. Oh no, this is from, yeah, I think it's Powerful Radio. I do not have that book with me. Second year, and we just go to 227 of Next Level Radio. Perhaps maybe it's in here. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to please just do that on your own. No, I do not have the on top of radio with me. So just excuse me. Okay. All right. So if news is presented in a boring manner, listeners tune out. Mike Sugarman advises reporters to take risks. So first, one, learn the rules of traditional journalism. Very important because, and we're going to go through a number of those rules today in this particular lesson. Then you just need to break them up. Okay. And this is again to 226, 227. Please just go have a look at that and beyond powerful radio. Okay. He always has one warning: avoid making mistakes with actual facts. Because, man, oof, like you put your reputation at risk, you put the station's reputation at risk. And it's a hard risk. Like we're talking, if it I say comes to pass, in other words, it's no longer a risk, it's an actual reality. You have a lot of damage control to have to get through to kind of substantiate why it is that you decided to air either commercially or in a community sense. It doesn't really matter. Incorrect facts within your news bulletins, etc. Please go and read Warren Levinson's AP Poetry Style Report on page 227 for me. Thank you. Okay, personalizing news. Put yourself into it, but keep your opinion out of it. It's super important to understand that we are all factual and that makes perfect sense. I'm not saying that so we don't have to state the obvious again about again putting in stuff that's incorrect or non-factual, whatever it may be. But what this particular statement means, or this particular header here is talking about how you really need to move the emotions completely out of. So the way that you write your bulletin and the way that you express and you use certain words, it needs to stay out, right? So it mustn't be coercive, it mustn't be manipulative, it mustn't be even to a certain sense convincing, emotionally convincing where you're saying like, listen, yeah, I'm going to use really, really emotive words like, well, um, what would be a really exaggerated word? Anything? Well, I'm saying under the word under the banner of exaggerated is probably the best way that I can explain it, right? Like the word lush. I know that you know like lush gardens is you would never say the word lush in a bulletin. It's just we just take those things out. And you can try and almost think like for example, if someone had a heart like their hearts were broken, we will um not say that in news. We'll just say that the population was saddened, or the we can't even say that a mother was devastated by by her 9-year-old son. The news of a 9-year-old son dying in a bus accident, whatever it is. Uh, it's just a little bit too extreme and find other words to replace to make it a little bit more monotonic and a little bit more again like we're showing no emotions and no um so we don't want to seem as though the station or the newsreader seems to be opinionated or favors a certain particular side or piece of a news story, whatever it may be, right? And you can imagine that like let's say we're talking about sports teams, or we're talking about politicians, or we're talking about laws that are being passed. And you could hear, if you had to imagine to hear a newsreader actually be emotive around this, you'd be like, man, this person is like is sharing too much of what they think, right? And not doing their job, right? Of being completely objective, right? All right, the interview is the heart of the news story, right? Remember the most important part, which is listening. So this is you, uh, let's say doing maybe an expose or you even trying to compile a new news story, and you're speaking to different people, perhaps maybe at a mine or a business, or maybe at a doctor's office or a patient, whatever it may be, right? And you're trying to compile a new news story, right? Ask simple questions so you can generate answers, get the facts clear. If you present the news in an interesting, topical, and relevant way, the audience will consider it a reason to tune in and not tune out, right? Listeners will feel that they can't go a day without finding out what's going on when you are, uh, obviously with inclusion of those news elements. Okay, so this is something that you know before, or you've known beforehand. Talk to one listener at a time. Use silence. It is powerful. So when you are executing, delivering, right? Remember your pauses are very important. Your full stops, your commas, those kind of punctuation, inflections, and expressions are very important as well. Please do not use any type of cliches like those. Again, I use it in my book. I think there's some reference to my book here somewhere in this lesson, right? Which is a word on radio, right? But like sunset kisses and yeah, that one is always like my cringe one. We don't use cliches, and say like forever and never ever, because that is something that we don't know for sure. We can't actually decide that something will never ever happen again, or it was This has been the first time ever that it's happened. You don't really know that. There might be some kind of like records or that might be broken or set, and might be what we can say like backed up by, well, record, like the Guinness Book of Records or whatever it is, blah blah blah. But very few things that you say in the news will ever have infinites, right? Infinite definitives, right? Like ever is in there. All right. Anyway, get new ideas from calling on old story sources, right? So, because you have a database of people that you will be chatting to, the companies, again, representatives, PR people, whatever it may be, you could also, like, let's say you come across a story that might involve, again, a political agenda. We can always have a political analyst at that point, or we can have the spokesperson for the government, or or parliament, whatever it is, or certain political parties make a comment or whatever it is, or we might have a direct contact as for a CEO, etc., etc., that could be speaking for a story that has popped up, that suddenly has some kind of relation to something that we had covered in the past. Off the record actually means off the record, so don't burn your sources. If you want to know things off the record, it's normally for context. Like you're saying, you like, can you please explain to me, like like we won't air this. That's what off the record means, as you know. But you'd say like, you'd ask someone, do you when you said there that you don't know anything about this particular I don't know, crime that happened, this robbery or whatever it is, you'd like, are you telling the truth? Like, does no cop or whatever it is in this particular, I don't know, office or segment, not segment, sector, whatever, not know a thing. And maybe the PR representative of the SAPS will say, look, we do have leads, right? And one particular hot lead that does lead back, that does direct us back to our own department, but we don't know that for sure. Let's say it's off the record. You cannot go now and do a bulletin that says that the lead is, because they are uncertain of what they said, and that is also their prerogative to be able to keep that information, withhold information for. And if you do go on there, you're asking for a whole lot of hurt in terms of lawsuits and all this type of stuff. Also, your credibility will be shot to rubbish, right? Okay. And the SCPS will never ever talk to you again, that particular person, whoever it is that you burned. So, is collecting audio actuality, right? Or yeah, actuality, right? Or doing an interview worth the effort? Can you better use what little time you've got on another story, right? Localize it. Obviously, know your city and use familiar terms for things. Keep a tease, so make them want more later. Excuse the spelling over there. So in other words, when we talk about a tease, we talk about that like the headliner. So when you open up the news, like it's 8 o'clock, and I'm Chris Jordan for Boston Broadcasts, Boston Broadcast News. In your top story, okay, and then I would give, let's say, a good tease for the top story, and go. Well, I'll probably move the 8 o'clock, or I'd say I'm Chris Jordan for BMH News. All right, after that, and move that into it. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, so please excuse the inaccuracy, right? But you understand, when reporters do start with a headline story, make the tease the same, and construct the tease the same way as we have taught you to create teasers for content, right? Make it a little bit vague, but make it enticing at the end of the day. So don't use the same lead that the reporters use. It's lazy and boring and makes you look, well, stupid. Okay. Rewrite all your source materials, and use multiple versions, please. So when you do, obviously you are an anchor. You're expected to do your job. So every time you step out of the studio, you've done your bulletin, you're going to go back, you're going to update your news, and you're going to rewrite and update each one of those stories. If one becomes irrelevant, you're going to chuck it out, you're going to replace it with something else, right? and you will reword like certain other stories to update like any facts or whatever it may be, or other perspectives that might be included, for that story that you have not covered yet, right? So your job is full time, just like any other job in the world, right? Use one thought per sentence, one thought per actuality, right, to be heard. So maintain a sense of speech rhythm in your writing, and read it out loud before you read it on air, because it's important to see where you will stumble on certain words, whether or not your diction or the construct of the sentence is correct. This is the type of stuff that you will only get to hear and obviously go and fix and correct if you read it out loud. You must read it out loud about at least 8 times to be able to have ownership, to make sure that you don't fumble or fall or whatever it is throughout the actual live execution of it. Very important, right? Avoid stats if you can. One, it confuses listeners because if we say 6.7 this and 9.7 that and then 18.7 that, it's too much. It really is too much. When you have stats within a bulletin, you need to pick the first and foremost, the biggest, the most important stat that you want to start, or you want to highlight on. Perhaps a secondary stat maybe later on in the actual story itself, but you need to stay away from numbers as much as you can. No one knows what is in your sound recorder but you. So use only the best and most powerful sounds, like our sound bites. So someone commenting on, or we're extracting something from X, or we're extracting something from YouTube, or whatever it may be. Go and get some good quality boxes, sound bites, should I say, not boxes, sound bites that are maybe 7 seconds, 10 seconds, sometimes it even goes up to, let's say, 30, 35 seconds, depending on the length allowed for the actual bulletin itself. Save time by listening to recorded audio on the way back to your studio to see what you sounded like. Often we do have field reporters included as sound bites, that the anchor will use in their news. Be aware of all these things when you do listen to bulletins from now on, please, and make your own, obviously, crit or notes, so we can go and revise it at any one point in class and make decisions. You'll never get every detail into the story, so decide what goes in and what to leave out for each story version. Okay, and I'll break into a one of the videos in just a moment. Okay, so yeah, from veteran newsman Ed Walsh, he says the following: know when to file and collect more information for a follow-up report for a long-running story. Do you understand? So knowing that you have different types of leads that could make the story a little bit more interesting, or the story is not complete, or it's finished, hasn't reached its end point, right? Okay, you want to be able to know that you can go and speak to more people. You need to go and follow up here. You need to go and go to another city or another town or another family or another doctor or whatever it may be, right? So know how to not give up on the rest of the story if there is more to tell. Right. Okay. So wear comfortable shoes, dress comfortably but professionally at the end of the day. The value of most press releases received rarely exceeds the cost of the bandwidth required to send them. Develop local angles to international stories. Put life into your copy. Avoid over attribution. So, as I said, you exaggerations, etc. Right? Use the present tense wherever possible because it is new in the news. Okay, we put the new into news. Tell me a story, a true one, but a story. And again, just because I don't have that right now, I'm going to I'm just going to quickly pause and see if I can actually, if I do actually have the textbook. Just give me a second. I don't think I do have it. Okay, just give me a second. Yeah, nope. I double and triple checked. I do not have a copy of Beyond Powerful Radio. I will go and ask for one when I get to campus on Saturday. All right, all right. So for just do me a favor and do yourself a favor. Go to page 232 to 235 on or in Beyond Powerful Radio and look at the tips from Sharon Catchin. Mark Howell, Denise Jimenez. Let me get that right. Oh, that's an interesting name. Jimenez Adams and Lynn Jimenez. Right. No double barrel surname over there for her. Okay. Right. So comes from this I recognize. This comes from my book, right? So from a word on radio. Some questions that you do need to ask before start looking for, while you are start looking for news stories that are relevant to you. How do radio journalists decide which events to actually follow? And remember, you also have to just consider always, I'm not just always consider your target audience, what's important to them, like what's the format of the station, like what stories are happening within your that person or that listener's community or direct lifestyle. What is important for them, before you can actually decide, oh, well, this is important, like maybe this person's death, or because we know news is pretty much always bad, right? Okay, but this particular robbery or whatever it is that important? Like if it's happening in Klerksdorp or whatever it is, no, not really, unless it has some kind of ripple effect to what we are doing here or what we have going on here in Gauteng, right? Um, you got to be careful. Ask certain questions, right? How do we go forward? How do we move forward to decide what is important for the bulletin? Well, we've got to ask ourselves a couple of questions, right? Is it new, right? So, is the story that we're covering new? Is it unusual? Is it interesting? Is it significant? And is it about people? Okay, it sounds very obvious, but I mean, if we're going to talk about a dog, for example, which is fine, we could talk about a dog, we'd have to obviously reference that to some kind of community, some kind of business, some kind of ownership. I'm saying like a dog owner or whatever it is, maybe some kind of interrelation or interaction with maybe other pets from other owners, whatever it may be. We'd have to place everything has to be about us. At the end of the day, right? If we're talking about, let's say, what is the word I'm looking for? If you're looking at like not nature, like nature conservation, right? So nature conservation, with I don't know, like endangered species, whatever it is, it's going to be a spokesperson about a person. You understand, from a person that's going to be adding to the story. So this is the elaboration for each one of those points? Is it new? If it's not new, it can't be news, right? For the unusual part, for something to be unusual, it has to be uncommon. So, in other words, something interesting. There has to be something different about what it is that you're telling me. It has to be odd or out of the ordinary. In other words, something that we don't already know. Please, it doesn't have to be bizarre news. It just needs to be something. Well, I didn't know that, is what the listener will say. It's very important to know that the list. Sorry, for the third point, is it interesting? It's very important to know the listener. So, in other words, know whom you are writing and presenting for. Let's say our hypothetical station, our target audience will be interested in other things that within, let's say, the news sphere, right? Compared to our neighbor or our sister or whatever it is station, right? That will be targeting and obviously invested in other areas of, particularly, like I say, like a news umbrella. One person's interest could be another person's bore, and it's only when a journalist knows the audience do they get the stories that matter, right, and do their job correctly. Is it significant? Whether a statement is significant is usually determined by the importance of why it is that you are making that statement, right? So just getting these flippant statements from even big figures, whatever it may be, like we always say, oh, just because someone's super important or whatever, or super powerful, like whatever they got to say is something that we should include into it. If they say just like general nonsense, there's no point in putting that in there. So is it about the people? Geller states that a news story should have characters and that people should be involved. The listeners should care about those characters themselves, right? So if not about others, then the story should have some kind of personality or personal effect around that particular listener's health, wealth, lifestyle, right? Okay. And we have to ask ourselves a couple of questions, excuse me. Does the story have a strongly defined subject? Is the new information new? Or is this new information, right? So who cares? How will it matter to the listener? Would you have a conversation with someone about the story off air? Once again, is it about safety, human emotion, money, any concerns around the lifestyle of that listener? And who are the characters or people involved in the story? Do we actually care about them? Right. So, in other words, do we care about this particular athlete? Do we care about this mom? Do we care about this child? Do we care about this top achiever? Do we care about whatever it is, right? Uh, According to me, that's from uh, my textbook, according to Jordan, newsworthiness can be defined by the following: how many people it affects, the reaction that it'll get from the audience, the shock factor. When I say the shock factor, I mean, like, again, if it's new, it's going to put a little bit of a in your body, you understand, in your mind. But I didn't know that. I didn't know that the petrol price is going to drop by R1.25 this evening. I didn't know that they are firing 2,000 people at ABSA. I didn't know that this mother was only 14 years old, for this baby, whatever it is that was just born. Like maybe she's the youngest mother in South Africa. Who knows, right? um, the reach that it has, so the importance of to which or what amount of citizens on the population it has, whether the issue itself is long running. In other words, we can have follow-up stories that's going to be carrying on maybe for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we never know, right? Who's involved in the story and why the story came about in the first place. I continue to say I advise. It's not awkward. It's just weird. Just say I okay. Jordan also advises that journalism look at the following criteria for the story. I'm not going to be childish. It's fine. Okay, so it's just me, right? Timing is very important. So in other words, if it's not new anymore, then why are you including it into today's bulletin? And you can include it if it happened last week and it has some relevance to today, right? You are allowed to include it, but you must give the context. You must provide the context correctly, right? So news means quite literally something that is new, topics that are current or newsworthy, and there is much more, so much new news around the old news, that the old news is quickly discarded. That's very important. So even if you, I don't want to go off topic here, but the thing is, like, when you have your own shows as well, there's this kind of like there's a very big temptation for most presenters to use a big story that might have happened yesterday or the day before or this week, and you're like maybe doing a weekend show, you're doing like a Thursday show or whatever it may be, or someone else has covered it already. Let's say like in the breakfast, you're in the drive, you need to really take that temptation and just throw it out the window, because it's a little bit of gluttony. Like, you're just greedy for something that is not it's not important to the listener. You understand? It's already been covered. It's fine. If you can't find a new angle to it, and a new position of value, yeah, I think that's the best way of putting it. Then don't put in your news, and don't put into your show as it is. Significance: the number of people affected by the story is important. So a plane crash in which hundreds of people die is more significant than a crash that kills 3 people. That sounds very callous, but it's true. Proximity, so obviously stories that happen near us have more significance. The closer to home the story is, the more newsworthy it is. Okay, prominence. As a rule, famous people get more coverage just in general. It's just, it's, but only if they are newsworthy, right? So if we have someone that is more newsworthy, that is not a famous individual, please use a common sense and say, listen, we're obviously going to go with this story because it's obviously more important to my listener. Okay, so continuing on, human interest stories have their own set of rules. So they often disregard the main rules of newsworthiness. So, for example, a human interest story is a woman that has had 14 babies. No, that's not possible. I think the most that someone has had is 10. I think it's 10 or 8. Ooh, that poor woman. Anyway, good Lord, that's a lot of kids. Anyway, but like that's a human interest story because we've seen that before, and it's quite common, right? Another human interest story would be that someone broke, like I say, like a Guinness World Book of Records for eating the most hot dogs in an hour or in a minute, or whatever it is. Another human interest story could be someone found like uh, uh, I don't know, like a Kruger, like a bunch of Kruger coins, on like while excavating, like doing their own amateur excavation on a beach down in Mossel Bay, So it's a human interest story. Anything that is a little bit warmer, fuzzier, that type of thing. Ingram and Henshaw point out that there are two other factors that journalists should consider before going with a story, namely closeness and personal impact. So, closeness, the same event happening in two different places, can have two very different news values. A revolution in your country is bigger news than one in a neighboring country. And I think we all understand that, right? So, what is the personal impact and why is that important? So, how does it impact my day? How does it impact my month, my year, my everyday? When I say the way that I think, the way that I'm going to, or where I'm going to buy food, the way that I'm going to get to work, the way that I am going to be aware of a pandemic or disease or my concern for my children, etc. Right? So this is personal impact that we're talking about. The larger the number of people who identify with the story, the bigger the story. People can identify with stories about other people, of course, because we are similar in many ways. So find those aspects of the story, just like we do in our radio content, like our show content, right? How are you going to make this hit home for a listener? Okay. So before we get into sourcing news, let's do a little bit of a break and listen and watch. I'm just gonna go to the okay, an example of eyewitness news. Put the sound there. Oh, shivered. Okay, no, that's good. That's fine. That's fine. I did. Yeah, let's go with. Uh, I can do a shorter story, but I'd like to take a longer one. I want you to, what's so lovely about TV, and I'm always jealous, like because they when they do exposés, it's so nice to be able to see like the different elements, like the news reader, like the field reporters, the media that's included, and this is obviously a story that's it's massive. It's one of about the kids that were racist, man, those stupid girls. That's what how you can describe them. These stupid girls. Uh, anyway, I just want to see where they are similar ones. Did look. Oh, there we go. I wanted this Zuma expulsion. Okay, so we can see. Here we go. Okay, the differences between how, for example, SABC might do it, right, and how Eyewitness News might do it then as well. Okay, all right. Well, let's. You can watch this one in the meantime. What this guy's going
So,
on?
former President Jacob Zuma has been expelled by the ANC's National Disciplinary Committee. How did we get here, you ask? I need you to go back in time just a little bit, not too far. Go back to December 16th, 2023, when we were in Soweto. Former President Jacob Zuma making a public announcement that while he'll die ANC, he could no longer lobby, i.e., campaign for the ANC. He could no longer vote for the ANC. He also
right?
called on members of the public, the electorate at least, to not put its faith in the ANC, saying, please help us get the ANC under 50% when the country eventually goes to vote. He then said he'll back a little known party at the time, the Umkhonto Wesizwe party. At the time, we're told the leader of that party is Jabulani Khumalo. You've seen what's unfolded, of course, between the former president and Jabulani Khumalo. You've also then had the elections where you've seen the MK party emerging as the third largest political party in the country, being really, for me, the story of the elections. The other story of the elections in 2024 is seeing an ANC after 30 years of power going under and relying on coalition governments in order to remain in power. And somewhere in the middle of all of those shifting sands and movements, those puzzle pieces, lies the answer as to why we got here. It's also where the ANC's NDC features. So in the middle of all of this, you've got an ANC that is not sure how to receive the news of its former president, who served 2 terms, going public saying, actually, this is not the party to back. In fact, the way former President Jacob Zuma explains it, he says it's the ANC of Ramaphosa that is an issue with, right? So he comes out saying that he can't back it. The ANC is NEC. This is the highest decision-making body in between conferences in the ANC. So every 5 years they vote, but in between, they've got this body of men and women who make key decisions about the life and operations and how the functions really of the ANC and responds to issues externally, internally, and otherwise. So the NEC, between stumbling and struggling to figure out how to respond to this, eventually decides that it should charge the former president, and that's when the NDC comes into the picture. The NDC itself has gone back and forth about the proceedings themselves. Should there be a physical hearing, which is what former President Jacob Zuma wanted? Is it virtual? You obviously need to bring in witnesses to make representations of sorts, and in this back and forth, they eventually reach a conclusion, which came out this week. It was leaked before the NC confirmed it, with Fikile Mbalula saying absolutely the NDC has found that the former president is guilty. What the former president was found guilty of course, is misconduct. That address that he made on the 16th of December goes against the ANC's constitution, which is actually quite clear. Around clause 25, I think there's a couple of sections, 17, 17, but the clauses are quite clear. It's not confusing at all that if you go out and you campaign and you back another political party that's not in alliance with the ANC, that's an act of misconduct. So he was found guilty of that, and the sanction, of course, from the NDC is that he should be expelled from the ANC. The leaked report is a really interesting read. It speaks about the charged person, of course, this being former President Jacob Zuma. It speaks about Tony Yengeni, who was his representative. Because remember, if you're charged in the ANC, according to its own constitution, you must be represented by somebody who is a long-standing member, serving member, or a member in good standing, rather. That's the language they use. Tony Yengeni is the person that he had picked, and there's a back and forth where it's not the merit that Tony Yengeni was dealing with, but the conditions under which the hearing would take place. Former President Jacob Zuma had insisted for the longest time that it should be physical. He also actually wanted it in public, right? So for all of us, and I mean, obviously we would have wanted to see it, for all of us to see how it unfolds, it is an internal process. He was requesting what he knew he would not be given a chance to have happen. What was interesting for me is at some point it was meant to be physical just before the elections, and I thought it was silly. I thought the ANC had scored an own goal. Can you imagine in the lead up to the elections, at the height of campaigning, former President Jacob Zuma going to the Tuli House for a physical hearing? What would be happening outside? And they speak about that in the report as well, where the security concerns was a factor. The interesting thing for me is where the NDC believes that the former president cannot be rehabilitated. It speaks about the great determination he showed in trying to be an opponent, to be a candidate, to go to parliament, so he can be an opponent to the ANC in parliament. Remember, there were tons of court cases. He wanted to be a candidate. So they look at that. They speak about how he didn't care about the issue of security. There was no concern. They speak about how he wanted to put on a circus. I think those are the words of Fikile Mbalula. It's like a movie, he said, that the former president wanted to use. I mean, duh, obviously. It would have been an easy on-goal, would have been an easy campaign. Can you imagine him standing outside Lutuli House denouncing the ANC of Ramaphosa? It would have worked. He would not have been the third largest party. It could have been the largest, if you ask me. So I do think that they recognized that a little bit too late. They were clumsy in their dealing. I'm now trying to also deal with the ANC's dealing with all of this, which I'll come back to in more detail a little bit later. Continuing with what we know as it stands, is that former President Jacob Zuma is consulting quite widely. I'm pretty sure with legal representatives as well, trying to figure out what the next step is. From the NC's perspective, he does have a window period. Once you're found guilty by the NDC, you have 21 days to go and appeal that outcome. So he's got that in the NC. I think the party is trying to see its constitution follow it to the latter. So he's got that. But I don't think that he'll go there. I've seen and I've listened to his foundation speaking, in Mzwanele Mangi that is. I've seen Tony Ngeni speaking, and all of them are kind of pointing to a need, a desire to continue fighting in some shape or form. I mean, somebody was being facetious, saying, oh, why not just go to the court route? So maybe, just maybe, the ANC will find itself wrangling with its former leader for many months to come still. I do know that this week they are in court again because they're still fighting over the symbolism and that name, Umkhonto Sizwe. Going back to the ANC's handling, for me, I think the ANC was clumsy at the very beginning. To first say to journalists, I will note this outcome, to then say we will not say anything, and then to go to all your public platforms. They were in the lead up to January 8th in Bombay and Pumalanga. Then there's suddenly you speak about the thing that you said you're not going to speak about, and then suddenly you go back and forth, and then you then remember you have a constitution, and it's quite clear and it's easy to follow. It's a simple step, and this could be done quite swiftly, and only to then follow that path a little bit later on. I think it was incredibly clumsy. The ANC could have handled it better, and I also find it difficult and I also find that they still have a difficult time answering why they handled it the way that they did. But I think who would have expected a former leader of an organization that they defended for so many years at such great lengths would do that to them? I think they're still reeling as a party from what the former president has done to them, from the impact, because the consequences of the elections 40% in part, largely actually, has to do with what former President Jacob Zuma's done. Heck, I don't even think some in the ANC realize it's lost power. So there's a lot of realities that the ANC still needs to make sense of. So I'm not surprised that when Fikile Mbalula, the Secretary General, is asked about the timing and whether it could have been handled better, he still is unable to give a thorough answer, a clear answer, as to why it was handled the way that it was. You can't blame them. He led for 2 terms. They've been in defense of this man well since before 2005. So I think to some degree, one is to go shame, I suppose. That's part of the struggle. What's been interesting for me are conversations with those in the party who seem to be pro-Zuma until the bitter end, and how they've made sense of this week's developments. And to be honest with you, I think they hardly blinked. I think the dramatic aspect of what's happened was in December. I think the difficulty in going, what, this really happened, was in May, in June, when the election results were coming out. I think what was done was done. A lot of people saying to me, what else could the NDC have done? What other possible conclusion could it have reached? It is quite clear that he's in breach of the Constitution. It is quite clear that he's impugned the integrity of the organization. And I know this is the part where everybody goes, oh, is this what it takes? Like you must insult the NC in order for the NC to act? Well, I'll leave it to you. I know that citizens complain about NC leaders who've been protected for doing wrong things in society, in government, case in point, and then only when they go against the mighty ANC do they get dealt with. I mean, I'll leave that for you. But people who were at his side for the longest time are not even blinking. As I said, they've moved swiftly past this. Even those who are against Zuma saying, you're wasting our time even making it a big deal that he's been expelled. Let's swiftly move along. There are bigger issues in the country to worry about. There is a GNU government that has a lot of challenges on its hands. It's got to be able to address issues that everyday South Africans are grappling with. So what's interesting for me is the idea that people think it's dramatic. Of course, you must recognize the moment. It is unprecedented. This is the former president of the ANC who served 2 terms. I know somebody will make an argument that, oh, he's not the most senior, there wasn't Ace Makashvili. I don't think it's the same. I think even if you want to make an argument about the Africanists who left to form the PAC, I don't think it's the same. I think that we must recognize this moment for what it is. And you must recognize that these are leaders with egg on their faces, because the very same ANC of today is the same ANC that defended the former president for as long as it has, in the face of so much outcry about so many issues. And here they are today saying that they feel embarrassed, some of them, that they defended somebody who turned around and did not take them into his confidence about what he's doing. I must also quickly say, I spent time with the former president in Nkandla, and you know what? He also has strong feelings about this moment. He feels hard done by the ANC of Ramaphosa. He's very clear about where he stands. He said he'll be angry until he dies. That's what he told me. And you know what? I believe him. The question I kept asking him is, but is it worth it for all of us, this country, to go down because of how you feel about the ANC? And the answer was, I'll be angry until I die. And I firmly believe that. And then the other question that I think we do need to answer is it the final nail in the coffin? Everybody been asking that. I'm like, oh, please, man. I think the final nail was put into the NC's coffin a while ago. It's a question of whether or not it's the final hammer to the nail. And I don't think it's there yet. I think that the NC knows where the NC is. I don't think it can reverse the trajectory. I think they're going to have a lot of NEC meetings. They'll do a lot of diagnosis. They do that really, really well, but I don't think they have the will to reverse the path that they're on. Some of them are saying they must look at this as an opportunity to rebuild. How many opportunities have they had? Every opportunity the ANC has had has been an opportunity to rebuild. But as you rebuild, you leave more and more people disenfranchised. I remember speaking to the ANC veterans League saying the sleepers must now come out. Those whose spirits are not with the ANC must also come out. I don't know if they will, because also we are in an era of careerism, right? Former President Thabo Mbeki, former president, founding president of our democracy, Dr. Nelson Mandela, these are leaders of the past who've spoken about careerism. I'm sure if you sit down with an ANC person, they'll speak about Ortambo and how some of the pitfalls he raised they're seeing today. So I'm not sure about that final nail conversation. What's also interesting to note is that those who are in defense of former President Jacob Zuma are skirting away from the issue of merit, and they're doing that for a reason. The other thing that's really, really confusing for many people is this fight for the ANC aspect of the former president. I think after spending so much time in a political party, it makes sense that you fight for the legacy you've built. Here's a person who's actually contributed, right, to brand ANC, to the liberation movement, to the liberation, the struggle rather, for the country's liberation. So I do think that a legacy often is well worth fighting for. But what I don't understand is why fight to remain in the ANC when you've got the MK, the third largest political party. You've got this baby that needs to be nurtured, that is struggling to find stability, that has shown itself to not have structures that are solid in place. I mean, look at the turnover as far as the MK party is concerned. You have an opportunity to actually see what you are calling your vision for this country through. Because clearly, some people believe in it. That's why you've managed to go past so many other political parties. Former President Jacob Zuma is not the only one who started a party. He was up against even Ace Makashules. Where is Ace Makashules? So your message resonates with somebody somewhere. So there is a baby that you could be spending time building. The question of where to from here remains to be seen, really. I did say to you earlier, he's apparently consulting, so let's see what that gives us. My thing, of course, from being around the former president is I always say this. I hope that people who love him take care of him. And I think I'll leave it at that.
Well, Gigi is and has always been, because I worked with her for so many years, I worked alongside her for so many years. She has been amazing at her job, and you can see how, what's so incredible when you see a great journalist or a great broadcaster like TD is that obviously you can see that she's prepared. The story definitely folds out in the correct order, in the correct direction, with all the facts that you do need. Again, this is a bit of an expose, breakdown, that type of like analytic journalism. The journalist is so she's so proficient in what she's speaking about that we got everything right. But also note that, and this is why I'm going to play something from, let's say, SABC News and something from, like I just did now, Eyewitness News. That is around the same story, to see whether or not you can actually see why we have different, obviously varied news sources or news outlets, whatever it may be, to be able to cover different opinions and different views in different directions, right? Sides of a story, right? So that the audience, the citizens, the population can get, well, they do have obviously. the well, I mean, just the beauty of choice. I say freedom of choice is one thing, but the beauty, that elegance of choice, so that we can go and find a little bit more about a story, not just from one direction, because we're not in a not a communist country, or dictatorship or whatever it may be, where it's kind of narrated for us, right? And what to think and what to do and what to say, but rather be able to go and make up our own minds about what it is that we are presented with as in facts. As I said, I'm going to go to this one here when we go back to when we just end the lesson. So I'm just going to go back to the slides. Just give me a second here. Here we go. All right, let us go back to sourcing news. All right. And again, yeah, with these videos, these two particular videos, obviously, like, again, I always encourage you to go make some notes. Like, what did you like? What didn't you like? What do you pick up? What can you use, like, from these particular role models? I would say really great journalists in this case. And even the construct of stories, and what would you find? What would you question? What would you fix, at the same time as well, what maybe goes in line, or falls in line with the theory that we are teaching you, right? Okay, sourcing news is about two things, right? How to get news, and obviously where to get it from. And how do you get news? Journalists often find news that comes to them. So instead of going to look out, go out and look for it, so we get a lot of stories that are either phoned into the station, sent to the station, as leads, as good hot, like I'd say, hot leads, right, and strong leads. We see, also there's a kind of an indirect, direct communication between us looking at what is happening on the news and other channels as well. But that would spark maybe an idea and be like, oh, okay, listen, like, maybe I should go and follow this different angle, whatever it may be, right? But it is we like, just kind of imagine yourself as a journalist. You can't just randomly, you have no superpower of imagining that something is happening down in Deep Sloot, right? Something would have to happen. Like, for example, a police report would be, obviously something that you would have access to. Like a citizen journalist, that might obviously make you aware of certain stories, whatever it is, or happenings, or people are just phoning in to tell you, listen, yeah, like, maybe I've I'm not misplaced my child. That sounds terrible, but I've lost my child, or there are fires in my community, or whatever it is. Please, obviously, not only report this, but help us get in contact with the right people, etc., etc. And so the journalist will have hot leads to be able to go and move forward with. Okay. Uh, let's give this a second. So that there we go. Right. Okay. So I know this is quite redundant in me saying that again. Okay, so where does the news come from? Right, obviously there was also news that journalists find for themselves and reveal to the public. So, as I said, follow lead, right? Follow lead. This needs to be a subject that somebody wants to keep secret, to put it mildly, I suppose, or maybe to the extreme. Many people have a story to tell, but they may not know how to write a media release. So you go out and you find the story, and you will be the one that goes and formalizes it. It's part of a journalist's job to find these people and report these stories. And the stories that are in public interest deserve to be published. So such situations must be investigated fairly, but fiercely, right? Fearlessly, should I say. And fiercely, why not? That also makes sense as well. The job of a journalist, I would not want it, even though it sounds very exciting. It is very exciting when you get there with your bulletproof vest, when there's like gunshots and gunfire, whatever it is. It sounds very exciting, very nice, and like Indiana Jonesy, but it really is like, it is a lot of consistent and ongoing work, right? So you got to be awake. I'm saying to awake metaphorically 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that is very difficult and very draining. And only like people that have this real, they really are born journalists, like got this fire within them, it really feeds them, can make great, obviously, anchors, or like I say, news readers, journalists just in general, right? Okay, news can be categorized into 15 different categories. conflicts. So if you're looking for a story, that it's going to fall under one of these categories, right? Conflicts, disasters and tragedies, progress and development, crime, money, the underdog, religion, famous people, health, sex, weather, food and drink, entertainment, sport, and human interest. How do you write and report for news at the end of the day? You'll see again, I'll put a bulletin just here, right, which we'll go through as well. It's maybe not the best written bulletin, but it's really not bad. Okay, I'm saying from my side. Okay, but it's a good bulletin, right? You'll see that in just a moment. Let's get into the writing of how we put these stories together. Note that on radio, like we have the shortest form of news broadcasting there compared to any other medium, so digital, print, let's say traditional print, or wherever it does exist still, and compared to obviously TV, where it is we have TV's got visuals which also help them out. They're allowed to do like we just saw their exposés, whatever it may be, much larger, denser, and longer depths or obviously, well, I think I don't really know the word for it to understand, right? They can do it durations. There we go, right? They can do that with let's say print or digital print, whatever it may be. You can write a long story with a lot of different facts that do supplement and make and give body to the life of that particular written story. In radio, we only have like I say, 4 or 5 sentences for a 30-second story, right? That we'll be doing in a bulletin, right? If you look at different stations, stations will have different, I'm saying, regulations that are set to or set by the station manager or the news department to the news anchors to say maybe the stories need to be 45 seconds or a minute long. Like, for example, talk radio is it's the prime example of news stories being much longer than 30 seconds, like I say, about 45 minutes, 45 seconds to about a minute, include sound bites, always include sound bites, that type of stuff. Again, depending on the policy that is set by that news department, it will follow accordingly. I'm saying the news readers will follow suit, right? But okay, in general, again, either or of these situations, either the 30-second or the 45 minutes situation format, right? This is still short. Like, so we only have a limited amount of time to be able to, or limited amount of space to write a good story. And that is why, well, obviously here, because the reasoning why people are listening passively, a radio consumer is not like they're not kept engaged, right? Through visuals they're not also in a different mind space. If you're reading something, you are reading for the long haul, quote unquote. You're invested in the long haul, so you've got patience for like a long, like obviously like a long article, whatever it may be, right? So, and when we listen to radio, they expect like, listen, keep it short, keep it very clear, keep the facts in there, and go from most to least important, which is here the inverted pyramid of news writing, right? Okay. Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm in the right place. Yeah. Okay. So one, sell the story to the casual reader or listener, right? And two, bring across the main point of the story very quickly so that even if the listener stops listening after the first sentence or two, they'll know what the lead. So that is the lead. That's what we call lead writing, right? To start with the lead, the most important fact or point within the story, and then we go from most important one to, or like I said there, to least important. To achieve this, we use the inverted pyramid style of news writing. Again, in my book, I describe the inverted pyramid of news writing as a system of writing that tells the most interesting of important information first, followed by the less meaningful information. That does not mean that the less, so the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth sentence, right? It's not that it's not important. It's just less important to compared to that lead, that first sentence that you are busy writing there. If we can have a look, I just want to zoom in a little bit so you can actually see uh, an example over here, and you would see what I mean in terms of most important, one, two, three, four, five sentences, good 30-second story over here. Most important to least important. Let's read it out. President Cyril Ramaphosa announced in Parliament on Monday that government will fund the establishment of a South African space agency as a step towards, should I say, modernizing the country. The department, which will be known as SASA, is likely to cost 28 billion rand over the next 4 years, as floating launch pads for the satellite or for satellite-bearing rockets are set to be built off the coast. Ramaphosa promised that the new agency would create countless jobs and give young South Africans motivation to focus on STEM subjects at school. It is time to take South Africa into the space age, the president said. SASA will be our giant lead forward, lifting South Africans out of poverty through job creation. Parliament will discuss the issue further next week. Most important to least important, right? So again, just in terms of sort of where there's acronyms that are being used or like even abbreviations at some other point, you must be able to first word that out. South African Space Agency. Then you can know that you can use the word SASA throughout the bulletin as well. STEM is widely known, right? So it's widely known. You don't have to go and obviously use or spell or word out the acronym for STEM, as ANC, for example, or DA, or whatever it is, right? But where there is a new, I say new, I think it is called an acronym, right? So it's my English was never ever my strongest suit, right? Anyway, but yeah, the acronym, right, would be something that you would do. So I think you understand they're most important, least important, and you can see that that will average about 30, maybe 32 seconds over there, right? Just going to quickly go back to this over here. So, how do we implement this particular inverted pyramid? The introduction of the story, the lead, is the most important part of the bulletin. The perfect intro or lead, according to Ingram and Henschel, is the most newsworthy aspect of the story. If we compare it back to this story over here, Cyril Ramaphosa announcing in Parliament on Monday, so we give it a when, we give it a who, right, and we give it a what. Like, what is he announcing, right? He's announcing that there will be a fund that is established for the South African Space Agency in terms of obviously modernizing the country. For why? That's the why. So already in just that first particular lead, just the first sentence, we've answered four of those very important questions that we would for any story that makes it important, right? Okay, short and relevant to the main story, grammatically very simple, able to create enough interest for the reader to read the rest of the story, and obviously suitable in style to the story. For example, if the story talks of a murder, then the style should be serious, respectful, and measured. No, like kind of jest. No, which is obvious. Like, why would you go and make a joke of someone being killed, right? So at any one point, so you can lighten it up for the tail ender. So if it is funny that a person, I don't know, again, jumped off, no, that's actually not funny, jumped off a building and survived. That's not funny at all. But perhaps maybe there's a man that proposed to his wife, and it was in front of his family, and I don't know, the sister jumped in and proposed to him. I don't know, whatever it is. Like, that's funny. Not funny. You can put it in a lighter situation. Yeah, that would be a story and a half. Anyway, depending on the nature of the story, here we go. These are the questions that you do ask: who, what, where, when, how, and why, to develop that lead. Okay, as you saw, an example was put out there from your textbook. Now, once the intro lead has been written, the journalist can then decide which other parts, the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth least, so most important facts are most important to, once again, least important, is what you're going to include in this particular story. Is the most newsworthy point included in the story? Is it more than 20 words? If so, try to cut it down, please. Avoid repetition and using unnecessary words. It's going to be difficult for you to execute the story on air, but plus it'll also complicate the way that a listener will process and digest that particular information. Have you used the active voice, the present voice? So, wherever you can, if it is something that happened yesterday, that's fine. He said this in his speech, that's all right, but the rest has to be done in the present tense. Okay, so have you put the facts first in the sentence? And is it up to date? So, new news, right? Are the verbs in the correct tense? Very important, right? In other words, is the action taking place right now? Has it already been taken? Or is it still going to happen? Continue just to close up this discussion here. I'll give you the following steps that you can follow to write the remainder of the bulletin. Step one, adjust your language to ensure that it is clear, simple, and concise. Review that story and make sure that you've included all the five W's and the one H. Never repeat information given in the intro or lead. Makes no sense. You've already said it anyway. If the lead doesn't grab the listener's attention, then your story is already a failure, right? So make sure that that lead is written correctly and it's punchy. And just like we would do a hook, for example, in a radio piece, you apply the same, obviously, rule or approach to the bulletin itself, right? Radio news stories are typically 100 to 300 words long, depending on how many other stories they might be included in the bulletin. Four, five, six. You might have to keep it a little bit shorter. Read the story out loud, please, so that you can estimate how long the story is. Also, again, your inflections, your pronunciations, whatever it is, whenever there is a word, a name, or whatever it is that you don't know how to pronounce, please go YouTube it. Don't Google it, YouTube it for the correct pronunciation and take that ownership to make sure that you do your job properly. Okay. Um, Step six, write the conclusion. And there should be a sentence or two that sums up the key points of the story. Step seven, check the whole story over to ensure that it is or it follows the relevant radio station's editorial guidelines and style guide. And I think this is the last one. Yeah. Step eight, fact check the script again and review the grammar. Super important because that is your job. Like, we can't have bad grammar, especially in a bulletin that is premeditated, that is scripted as well. I do understand that a lot of us as presenters are not the best in English. Again, I've just confessed to that as well. My grammar is not maybe 10 to 15% is not correct, But I do also hear myself and be like, okay, maybe I should actually just fix that and work on that as well. It's not excusable at all in any part of radio or broadcasting, right? I get that. But in news, oh my word, if you put your grammar incorrectly, like even if if you read something and the grammar's wrong with the spellings, you're like, what? How did it make it on News 24, whatever it is? Right, that editorial process is lame. Right, it's wrong. Right. So final tips for a news bulletin. Repetition is the most common error. Do not repeat yourself. Please avoid commas because your breaks, like when you breathe, like you've got to have that kind of feel where you actually don't hear the breath. If you do some, you will need commas sometimes, but the majority of the time, an amateur newsreader will include commas because they don't know that they should rather include full stops. So that fact, 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 and I also have. So it's twofold. One, so that I can execute correctly. I have enough, obviously, like in terms of my breath, my breathing. I've got enough of a capacity to execute that particular sentence out correctly, right? And the second thing is that the listener needs to process things in very small amounts, right? So in small doses. So you one small sentence, they get it because they're passive listeners. One another small sentence, another small sentence, so that the whole story can be consumed correctly. All copy should be typed and double spaced to make it easy to read. And also, I mean, for whatever reason, if you are reading off a paper, which normally doesn't happen anymore, you can go and put any kind of written, like use your pen, whatever it is, a note for yourself, like here's where I'm going to stop, here's where I'm going to breathe, here's where I need to make sure that I focus on inflection in terms of like an acronym or whatever it is, or a certain word or a certain stat, whatever. You're going to date the first page of the script and include page numbers, write out abbreviations, underline text for emphasis, and use dashes for long pauses, right? Okay, and again, the news editing software that is available that you do work on at a station, more predominantly at commercial stations, will do a lot of this for you as well. What else? Avoid technical terms and jargon that could confuse the listener as well. Check your facts, please. Credibility can be thrown away in a second, right? With one word or one, I say, yeah, well, word. Like you could get a very important name, like for example, the name of a state or a province or whatever, wrong, and you were like, what are you going on about? Anyway, so limit the number of figures that you include. Use the active voice once again. Write in the present tense to create a sense of immediacy. Be objective in your writing. Never plagiarize. Please never don't copy words from a press release verbatim. You must go re-paraphrase, put into your own words if you are drawing from another source, and also credit them when necessary. And paint a picture that someone can imagine, because remember, this is theater of the mind. Good. Right, before we get into the example, let's quickly have a quick visual break and let us share that I know the SABC news report, right? We went to oh shit. Oh, I thought I clicked on the wrong one. Okay, let's look at the same story. How did the SABC take care of it?
Former President Jacob Zuma enjoys immense support from his home province, KwaZulu-Natal. The emergence of Zuma's 7-month-old party, Umkhonto weSizwe, changed the political landscape in the province. The province was the country's battleground in the 2024 general elections, with most political parties hoping to bring the ANC's majority to below 50%, a tall task that the MK party managed to do. But Zuma's affiliation to the MK party has now cost him his membership in the ANC. The ANC in the province says the decision to expel Zuma was long overdue.
It's a tedious process. It's not an easy exercise to deal with the former president of the ANC who fully deserted the ANC, who joined another organization. Our constitution is clear, but the ANC was strategic enough, tactical, that you don't have to act in that way. You must robustly engage the constitution. You must follow all the prescripts. At the end of the day, the issue of expulsion is something that is long overdue.
The Umkhonto weSizwe party says that the decision to expel Zuma was not surprising.
What can you say about the ANC? The ANC will do whatever that it can to save their skin. I mean, President Zuma did say to them that I'm still a member of the ANC, but if they see fit that he must be expelled, then they've expelled him, and whatever the president will do of Umkhonto weSizwe, we don't know. Maybe he'll appeal, maybe he won't appeal. But the fact of the matter is, the ANC is sinking. Now they want people to go down with them. As the ANC is sinking, the Umkhonto weSizwe is rising.
Many residents have mixed views on the matter.
Yeah, I think in principle the ANC has to follow a disciplinary code. So if any member does what he has done, then disciplinary action needs to be taken. You need order in an organization, a political organization. So being the ex-president, does it exclude him from discipline? I think, the greater responsibility you have, the more accountability there needs to be. So my view is that it was the right decision.
I haven't been following up on politics that much, but I would kindly say that maybe it's a good decision, because either way, we don't know where the corruption is coming from, because people say it's, who's this, Ramaphosa, some say it is Zuma, so we don't know. So I think it's best that he is out so that we may know where exactly is the problem.
I feel like Zuma being chased out was a no.
he must come back and lead us. Maybe they can work together with Ramaphosa.
I think they did the right thing because you can't be in two parties at one time, because it's possible that you can take information from another party to another party, which will cause conflict.
Police in the province say they are prepared should there be disruptions that could emanate from Zuma's expulsion.
We are ready to police the province in case of any eventuality. It could be any unrest resulting from any other thing. So we stand ready as the police. That's why we still have got some numbers. We have good intelligence on the ground that's telling us what could happen, what we need to prepare for. But we are quite pleased that at this stage we don't have intelligence that informs us that there is an unrest planned in some way. But should it happen, we stand ready to react to ensure that there is stability. We all learned the lessons from the 2021 unrest. Around, we are better prepared. We can't be found wanting as the police.
Zuma has been given 21 days to appeal the judgment with the ANC's National Committee of Appeal. For SABC News, I'm Jade Paulser in Durban.
All right, nice. Okay, so in terms of the comparison, no, it's not always going to happen. I get that the one will do an expose for like we saw on EWN. Compared to this, which is obviously a great little. This is a much shorter news expose, but it's an actual news bulletin, quote unquote. Well, I mean, it's a news story that has different elements. We've got voxes from people there. We've got obviously imagery that is relevant. We've got obviously the newsreader or the field reporter themselves narrating their script or their copy. Very nice. I like that. Obviously, well, for me, right now at this very moment, I'm not really in the mood for an expose like Eyewitness News. I'm rather in the mood for just consuming the facts just over here. Whereas with TD, like she was more, there was all the facts were there, but there was a push. You see the difference just also, not just in these particular situations, just in general, you're going to find that there's going to be different angles and different agendas that again, a particular station will decide they are going to do. Let's complete this long lesson by reading through a news example that I've written here for you. So please don't judge me on execution just yet. We'll work on execution. Let's just look at the story. So what I put together is and these are old stories. Again, I did this, I prepped this, I think last year or the year before, whatever it may be. But I think it was, I definitely would think it was the year before because of the second story here. I did include, again, a tail ender, a local story, and an international story. And then I included a very difficult, like in terms of execution, wording for sports. So let's have a look at it. 8 o'clock. Okay, news and sports update. Okay, in your news at 8 o'clock, illegal miners have been arrested by the Johannesburg Metro Police, and a bill to pass police reform in the US, spurred by the death of George Floyd, has collapsed. With UBMH News, I'm Chris Jordan. Good morning. 4 suspected illegal miners have been arrested after a shootout with police and Johannesburg Metro Police and the Johannesburg Metro Police Department, or the JMPD, officers in Sloverville outside Dobsonville in Soweto. The officers have been in the area on Wednesday, or had been in the area on Wednesday, investigating the murder of 2 people when they were shot at by about 20 illegal miners. No one has been reported injured. After the shootout, police found a monkey believed to have been used by the illegal miners in rituals. The 4 face murder and attempted murder charges. All right, moving further afield. A little bit more difficult here, a little bit more complex, and just going to get more complex as we move along. So, moving further afield, a bipartisan effort spurred by the death of George Floyd to pass a police reform bill in Congress has collapsed. Just note the attempt at pausing so that we can make sure that breath and execution is correct. This is in accordance to US lawmakers on Wednesday, which has resulted in a setback for President Joe Biden. The George Floyd Justice in Policing Act was approved by the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives in March. Democratic and Republican senators have been seeking to hammer out a compromise. Let me just say that again. So, Democratic and Republican senators have been seeking to hammer out a compromise and bring a bill to the floor of the Senate for a vote, but they said on Wednesday that they've given up. The failure of negotiation is a blow to Biden, who was elected in 2020 with strong African American support and has pledged to make police reform a priority of his administration. Ben Crump, a lawyer for the Floyd family, expressed extreme disappointment and said, "In the last year and a half, we have witnessed hundreds of thousands of Americans urging lawmakers to bring desperately needed change, should I say, to policing in this country so there can be a greater accountability, transparency, and ultimately trust in policing," Crump said. And finally, Netflix has released a trailer to the Ant. Let me start that again. And finally, yeah, oh, my nose. Anyway, and finally, Netflix has released a trailer to the anticipated documentary Britney versus Spears. A day before Britney Spears heads to court in her long battle against the conservatorship. Let me say that again. A day before Britney Spears heads to court in her long battle against conservatorship, she has been she has been in for 13 years. Nope, that's too many mistakes. Let's go again. Oh, okay. A day before Britney Spears heads to court in her long battle against the conservatorship she's been in for 13 years, which will be available on Tuesday, 28th of September. The 28th of September. According to the official logline, Britney versus Spears tells the explosive story of Britney's life and her public and private search for freedom. Director Erin Lee Carr, who also directed How to Fix a Drug Scandal and Dirty Money, and journalist Jenny Eliscu delve into the tangled weave of the conservatorship. "I've worked my whole life. I don't owe these people anything," Britney can be heard saying in the trailer. So just to give a little bit of a closer, that would have to be executed a little bit differently. "So I've worked my whole life and I don't owe these people anything," Britney can be heard saying in the trailer. So that difference in execution, just to know. In your financial indicators, the rand is trading at 14 rand 67 to the US dollar, 17 rand 19 cents to the euro, and 20 rand 11 cents to the pound sterling. Gold is trading at $1,733.50 per fine ounce, and a barrel of Brent crude oil will cost you $76.19. In your weather, the capital of Pretoria will reach a high of 26 degrees, and Joburg at 24 degrees today. Looking at the traffic, there is a stationary vehicle over there. There is a stationary vehicle 800 meters after the Diep Kloof off ramp from the N1 southbound and Rand Show interchange. The left shoulder has been blocked off. Alternative routes are clear along the R553 south. And finally, the Springbok rugby team is to avoid British quarantine with a France stopover before their 3 test matches. All that and more at 8:30. Good morning. With your BMH News headlines at 8:30, I'm Chris Jordan. Illegal miners have been, arrested by the Johannesburg Metro Police, and a bill to pass police reform in the US, spurred by the death of George Floyd, has collapsed. Full stories at the top of the hour. Your financial indicators, the rand is trading at 14 rand 67 to the US dollar, 17 rand 19 to the euro, and 20 rand 11 cents to the pound sterling. Gold is trading at $1,733.50 per fine ounce, and a barrel of Brent crude oil will cost you $76.19. In your weather, the capital of Pretoria will reach a high of 26 degrees today, and Joburg a high of 24. A quick look at your traffic. There is a stationary vehicle 800 meters after the Diep Kloof off-ramp, after the N1 southbound and Rand Show interchange. The left shoulder has been blocked off and alternative routes are clear along the R553 south. We go and play the ID for the sports. In your sporting news, South Africa will spend 11 days in France in October to avoid quarantine before three tests in Britain. The World Cup winning Springboks head to Wales on the 6th of November, to Scotland 7 days later, and to England on the 20th of November. The tournament's director, Claude Atcher, said that we have made an agreement with the South African Federation to be able to benefit from the presence of the team and players to do some promotion for the 2023 Rugby World Cup. Atcher continued to say, what is currently happening has unfortunately proved that we're not safe from racism. And we had to address the issue to say that it's totally unacceptable and inappropriate in our sport. Captain Siya Kolisi's side face New Zealand in the 100th test between the sides this weekend before their last game in this year's Rugby Championship the following Saturday, also against the All Blacks. So Flanker Kolisi became South Africa's first Blacks test. Let me say that again. Flanker Kolisi became South Africa's first black test captain in 2018 and led his country to the Webb Ellis Trophy a year later. South African bowlers Andrich Nortje and Kagiso Rabada, should I say, helped set up an 8-wicket win for the Delhi Capitals on Wednesday in an Indian Premier League match that went ahead despite a Sunrisers Hyderabad, right? I have looked it up. Despite a Sunrise Hyderabad player testing positive for coronavirus, Hyderabad left arm quick Tangarusa Natarajan, there we go, that's better. Tangarusa Natarajan and 6 of his close contacts were isolated hours before the latest match in the 2020 tournament in Dubai. An IPL release said Natarajan is currently asymptomatic, while the contacts and other Hyderabad players are all returned as negative tests. On the field, Norkia returned figures of 2 for 12, and fellow Proteas Quick Radaba took 3 wickets to further hurt Hyderabad, who managed just 134 runs for 9 wickets after electing to bat. The left-handed Shikhar Dhawan says or leads the IPL battling chart with 422 runs, including 3 half-centuries in the 9 matches. The IPL only resumed Sunday in the United Arab Emirates after a 5-month suspension because of a devastating surge in COVID-19 deaths in India. The teams are returning to the event in the UAE. Have also been put down. The teams that are returning to the event in the UAE have been put in strict bio bubbles. Right, and Manchester United has crashed out of the League Cup as West Ham United avenged their painful loss to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Ooh, Solskjaer. Yes, I kind of forgot now how to say this. Solskjaer. There we go. I think that's it. Solskjaer. Okay, this is actually, I want to show you, this is a good example. So I think it is Solskjaer. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I'm just going to quickly stop sharing here. Going to get this here and show you what I mean by going to use YouTube. Yeah, this is a long lesson there. Just give me a second here. It's good stuff. Okay, so let me just put it there, and I need pronunciation. Here we go. Okay, so how to pronounce Solskjaer. Solskjaer. Let's have a look.
One hand on the trophy, but Teddy Sheringham scored in the 91st minute before Ole Gunnar Solskjaer scored in the
Solskjaer.
Gunnar Solskjaer scored in
Solskjaer. No, me do it again.
Ole Gunnar Solskjaer scored
Solskjaer. So that's much better than the way I said it. Solskjaer. That's easy. Okay, so let's go. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Let's go back to the last story over there. Yeah, okay, here we go. Solskjaer. Nice. That's much easier. Good Lord. Okay. And Man United has crashed out of the League Cup as West Ham United avenged their painful loss to Old Gunnar Solskjaer's side with a 1-0 win at Old Trafford, while Chelsea and Tottenham survived a penalty shootout to reach the fourth round on Wednesday. The Hammers suffered a gut-wrenching 2-1 defeat against United in the Premier League on Sunday when David De Gea saved Mark Noble's stoppage time penalty after Lingard. Let me just say that all again. The Hammers suffered a gut-wrenching 2-1 defeat against United in the Premier League on Sunday when David De Gea saved Mark Noble's stoppage point or stoppage time penalty after Jesse Lingard's late winner. Damn, man, I want to get that right. Let's do it again. The Hammers All right. The Hammers suffered a gut-wrenching 2-1 defeat against United. Nope, again, once again. The Hammers suffered a gut-wrenching 2-1 defeat against United in the Premier League on Sunday when David De Gea saved Mark Noble's stoppage time penalty after Jesse Lingard's late winner. Nice. But David Moyes' men got a measure of revenge 3 days later as Manuel Lanzini's first half goal dumped United out in the third round. So I did this when I created these stories. I did this on purpose so that when you try and practice, there's a lot of challenges here, and that you have a good time, fun time, reading and practicing your news over there. That is it for this long lesson. Hope you learned a lot about news, and I'm going to stop it there. I will see you in the next.